Well, hello. I'm so glad that we're all here today. I'm Ellouise, and there are two other artists here with me to discuss something that they've been very involved in. And I'm excited about that. I've known these women for a long time, but we haven't been seeing them. And they are talking about Maxine Cable, who was a woman that every one of us knew. Unfortunately, she's not with us anymore, but you'll hear about her and whatever. And isn't that what it's all about? To catch up with those that you've needed and that you've known and whatever you felt about it. So I'm excited. First of all, I want to introduce you to Claudia Vess. Claudia, how are you?
Hi, Eloise. Thank you. I'm very well. And I'm very excited to be here and to talk about Maxine Cable.
I think she's been something that we've known, all of us, for years. And you're going to bring, the two of you are going to bring a lot of information that nobody else knows. Now, how about you, Lucy?
Well, I am delighted to be here today. Thank you so much for having me and for having Claudia so we can talk about our endeavors over the last several months.
Yes, yes, you've been the two of you. Let me just strike on this. Something else comes to me that I'd like to would be a thing. It moves a little bit off the edge, but it's important for what you've done. That when Maxine uh, was older, she was sick and she died. But then there was a lot of work out of the Gallery 10 downstairs, downtown, all these other things. And y'all have really helped with that. You've made it possible for her things to be preserved. So, what do you think's the biggest thing you've got your hands on to get that started?
Well, I think we had preserved the papers from the Gallery 10, which she was one of the founders of, and we worked as archivists in a way so that her work could be preserved by the Women's Museum. And that was one of the things that we worked on for so long.
How long did it take you to get that thing organized?
Claudia, would you say
we
about,
we actually started
yeah.
that project when Gallery 10 closed, and then we worked on it, making an inventory of all of those materials, and then we put it aside. And so after Maxine passed away, there were many more materials for the archive in her studio. So as we were going through her studio, we pulled out all of the Gallery 10 things and put the archive really together that included all of Maxine's very good documentary materials and the materials from Gallery 10. I actually worked as an archivist, so we had an idea about what to do, and we did it, and we're delighted that the National Museum of Women in the Arts Library now has all those materials.
Terrific. You could be living with them for the rest of your life. So it's wonderful that they're taking it over and preserving so that her story and everything isn't what you just said, the both of you, that's what is necessary for artists and others. When you get older, that somebody's got to save that stuff in order for it to be preserved.
Absolutely. And of course, so many places have archives that are filled, and it's not easy to get works accepted. And in the uh, aftermath of all of this, uh, I guess Claudia discovered the fact that we could have a show uh, and of work that we had saved of Maxine's, of not only her papers, but her artwork.
Right. So
Right.
there's always that help each other kind of thing, or that thing of taking care of the art that you've got to have, or anything that you've got to have to keep her to keep her story alive. Now, that's the problem that you may have with me, is that I'm an artist, but more than that, I became a storyteller. And I feel like your job that you're doing with this is incredibly important, because when you tell a person's story, like you're going to do about Maxine, you bring her back. That happens everywhere. So I'm really interested to see how you're going to tell that story. Not a big thing. You don't have to do the whole thing. What I'm saying is story is really important with what you're doing. Or did you find it so fast that you didn't need to do anything like that?
One of the things about Maxine is that she knew and was a colleague of many, many, many artists in Washington, D.C. Many artists got their start, their bump into the art world through Maxine's efforts and Gallery 10. And when she met an artist and she noticed a spark, she would encourage them to exhibit, to show at Gallery 10. And she was very influential through the early 1970s through the early 2000s. She was an independent curator besides being a founding member of Gallery 10. Gallery 10 existed at DuPont Circle from 1974 until 2010. It was a very long time for a gallery to exist. The gallery is artist run, and one of the wonderful things and important things about Gallery 10 is that it was established to help artists be able to show the kind of work that they wanted to show. Maxine was an important artist because she is the person who really started a place where artists could show installation artwork. This was a new media at the time, and what that means is that, not only do you do an artwork that you put in a frame, or you do an artwork that's a sculpture that takes up a certain amount of space, but in this case, in an installation, it's an environment. So it's the wall that the piece hangs on, it's the environment of the sculptures, it's the number of sculptures that exist in an environment that take up in Maxine's installation. She would fill the entire gallery. The entire room would be one installation artwork. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that we've all been to her home, where she had put something on the wall at every possible place because she was living in an installation. That's
that's right.
how I
Home,
felt
her
about
home
her.
was definitely an installation,
Right.
and she and Jim showed not only their own work there, but they incorporated work from artists in Washington, D.C. They bought many pieces from D.C. artists and artists abroad because they traveled a great deal. And Maxine was also very adept at arranging exhibitions in other countries and having exchange shows through the gallery. And she oftentimes would buy artwork from artists that she met there, or art that she saw there, in a gallery. And those things were all a part of the house. I think an important thing to say about installation art is that what you do is you use an object as a piece of paint. It's you are drawing with the colors, the textures, the forms, the shapes of these objects, and so it is exactly the same as a painting, except instead of paint marks, you're actually using objects, 3D
Oh,
and
I think that's totally true. And that is the power of the colors. The really things that some artists use colors, some artists don't, or they're anyway, we know all about that. We won't take the time for that stuff. But, I just found her when I started being closer to her and in places where she was working, that she was an interesting person that was open to have people come in, to have people do things and whatever. And it's kind of funny. Lucy, what do you think to look back at Gallery 10 and we were all putting up pieces of stuff on the wall?
Well, it was an artist-run gallery, which meant we, as artists and members of this group, were able to curate, install, and do all the things that are necessary to put on an exhibition, a serious exhibition. And and we all had different opinions and different ideas, and that, but it all came together. And again, with her work, she was telling a story in her way, and that included very humble objects, but some that would startle you. So you'd go into this and see these things that you weren't expecting, and you had to try to interpret what she was trying to tell you through these pieces. And and I found that fascinating to see how she could take anything and just make an art piece out of it.
Right. That it was so interesting, Maxine's development as an artist. You know, she started out doing large color field geometric paintings. She did study one summer with Hans Hofmann. She and her husband spent a summer up in Provincetown where he taught, and at that time, you know, the art world was a very electric place. You know, it seemed at during that era that art was really the place to be. It was kind of the intersection of everything in the world would come together and be expressed through art. And you know, I think that led to Maxine expanding the kinds of artwork that she did. From color field painting, she moved into printmaking. Um, she worked at Glen Echo, especially with Nosh Chris. They did a lot of printmaking together. And at that time, Maxine she was very interested in rituals and mythology. And she began to look into Egyptian motifs and traveled to Egypt. And so then her themes became, you know, something to do with what she discovered when she went to Egypt. Her library was amazing, uh, very thorough in terms of Egyptian resources. She used cartouches in some of her prints, and she also made large portraits of herself, of Jim's parents, that have the feel of a kind of mummy in a box, although they're not
That's
mummies.
kind of
They have,
nice.
they have face masks and other attributes, um, and from there she became interested in rituals in India, and they did travel there. She was interested always, of course, in the role of women and you know the the many um, the many faces, I guess you could say, of women's role in a culture. And in India, she became acquainted with Suti, which interested her and also was, you know, rather surprising. And from there, she expanded even more, and she looked into Asia, and she became very enamored of Buddhist kind of monasteries and practice.
But you know
And
what was impressive, excuse me for interrupting you, but uh, for what she did was she enveloped people to come to her, you know, to hear what she was doing. But I was impressed that her husband, Jim, was always there supporting her. You know what I'm saying? That they were a team. It
they were
seemed
a team.
that they were really a working team. He was an artist himself and a photographer. Is that right? Was he
That's
doing?
correct.
And so you had this power. I traveled twice with her. You had this power, people, you know, and I sometimes stood back and just watched it. just watched and saw her, what she was talking about, what other people were coming up to her. That's really exciting, isn't it? When
It
that
is.
Maxine
gets
was
to happen.
Maxine was very interested in creating spaces that would draw people in, and she did that in many ways. At the house, they had supported many art groups. There were many meetings that happened at their house. The sculpture group met there. She was part of a group called the Vestal Virgins, and they had meetings and social events at her house. Um,
Unknown caller.
Oop, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, no,
And
that's okay. That
and
often happens.
and she did the same thing with her installations. In her installation, she was creating a mood and she was always very careful to arrange the space which would draw people in and invite them to experience the kinds of experiences that she had when she was traveling, and her search her search was really um, about moving from everyday things that we don't pay attention to you know a, a more sacred realm, really.
Well, that's very powerful, and one of the things I would like to see, have somebody hold up how many how many minutes do we have left? 5, 10, 15. See, I don't have a thing here that shows me how, so I'm looking for where the times are. We're going to do this. I'm going to cut that a little bit because there's so much more that you're going to want to add to her. Um, and I had a question for you a minute ago and I forgot it. So anyway, how did you feel when how did you both feel when you see her working on something different that she hadn't been working on before?
Well, um, one would come to the gallery and be surprised at what uh, she would be using in her work. For instance, she had a political side to her in terms of her commentary on a war in general. So there were pieces that she used that illustrated that. So you weren't expecting to see that, and it was very powerful. And she did have works from her Buddhist experience in addition, but she didn't just stay with one thing. She embraced many ideas in her work, and that was what was very exciting to see.
I had one opportunity with her to go to Italy with a group that came from Gallery 10. And on this particular thing, we did 5, as I recall, could be less, in different places where the thing was put up and more people came because they didn't have just one. That we were all working to put them up different places. And the responses of the people that were coming up was all different. And I remember one thing that when you talked about the thing, the day that we had, what is it? It was 2/11.
Yeah.
9/11.
Hmm.
Yeah, we were all in Italy
Correct.
and we were putting up artwork. Do you remember that where all of that was coming together to say something about how people felt about that desire, this horrible thing that was happening at home?
Well, as far as I was concerned, I did not go to all the venues that you went to, but we suddenly felt somewhat isolated because we found out suddenly, and so we were very apart from the group as well as being at home, and so it was quite a tense moment for us, my husband and myself. And Claudia, did you go with the group on
I,
the?
I was in Venice at the exhibition. The exhibition per se was not specifically, of course, about 9/11 because it hadn't happened yet. But yes, I was just leaving I was leaving Venice the following day after that. And yeah, so it was quite a surprise. But I must say the Italians were reached out to us, and they were just very sympathetic and supportive, and as horrified as we were. They just could not have been more sensitive to, you know, how we must be feeling. When I was leaving at the airport, I was sitting in the airport, and it was, you know, early the next morning. I had not been able to get a newspaper the day of. They were all sold out, but I did get a newspaper, and I was sitting in the airport with my newspaper, and the Italians like left a little circle around me so that I could absorb the newspaper. It was quite a lovely experience, actually, to be supported by them at that moment. But you know, I mean, Maxine did address all of the major themes which art really deals with. You know, peace, war, love, struggle. One of her most powerful pieces, of which there are photographs, is an installation that had sort of like runners that would go up to a central area where there was a struggle, and the actors were horseshoe crabs, you know, which have a very and the very ancient sonic kind of sensibility, which Maxine loved. She loved the beach, and she would save their shells from the beach. And small toy soldiers, and she and I think there were some dinosaurs and snakes and various kinds of things that were all involved in a major struggle in that installation. It was quite a powerful thing. And you know, I do want to say that the retrospective at the Sebrof Forbes Cultural Arts Center really shows the range of her work, from geometric paintings, the early things, to works in plexi boxes, including one that's a light sculpture, very early light sculpture that lights up. It looks like sort of, I don't know, a cosmic warp in metal, and her veil pieces and installations, including Peace Bomb and Stupa Village, which is really quite an amazing installation that she crafted from baskets without much change. She didn't paint them. She was very sensitive to the various textures and colors, and she transformed these things into an incredible atmosphere that when one enters the gallery, you know, you have an experience about what she was after.
I think what you're describing is really dynamic for her. You know, for all of us that were there at the feet, so to say, there's a lot that we learned from her, isn't it? Did you ever feel that way, that you heard her? That was just something that if everyone could take art or art attempts or installations or anything and have that strong feeling for what was happening. So we've got about 1 minute or a minute and a half. What was your favorite thing of seeing today?
Um, I guess it was just the whole breadth of her work. It was very exciting to see what one artist could accomplish.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is not here right now. Dennis will tell us something else. So we're going to have to just love each other again and think of her. And this gather together, what you've said is a way of remembering her. That's, I think, rather wonderful. And people will come and look at what you've said and what you've reminded people. Thank
I,
you
I
for coming.
hope they do come to see her artwork.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that'll be said. Dennis will come, who is the director for the new thing, and he's going to talk to us again. So thank you for coming. It's great that you were here.
Our
Thank
pleasure.
Hello. It's a little later in the afternoon, but we're so happy to be here tonight to introduce you to somebody that's putting in something new that's going to mean a lot to our area here and to bringing area things. So the important person that's coming down tonight is Dennis Forbes, and he is the director and he's in charge of bringing in really interesting programming. And in my way of knowing things, because of the way that I deal with this, is it's art. It's art way. And this is something really special for MMCTV. Dennis, will you come forward and say hello? And we'll say hello and welcome to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dennis Forbes, and I'm the manager of Sebrof Forbes Cultural Arts Center in Kensington, Maryland, at the corner of University and Newport.
How did you choose to be in that situation?
Well, I've always been an art advocate, and I had a salon in Hyattsville, Maryland, but I bank in Kensington. And so I was riding by one day going to the bank and I saw this for sale sign. I became excited. I wrote it down, but I wrote down the wrong number. So it was 3 weeks later that I actually came back. And that time, what I did was I took a photo of the building signage. And that started our journey back in 2017. So we bought the building at the end of the year in December. And so now we are open for business and we're trying to let the community know that we are there. And so we have an extensive outreach program that will let people know of what we are planning, what kind of programming we're going to do, and we are open to suggestions. So,
When I heard about you and called and asked if you would come and do one of these programs, I'm an artist and I like artists. And we haven't had a lot of programs, well, at least not on the program right now, but we're going to be through your things and letting people come and know when you're asked, when somebody says, hey, I've got this really great thing, if you can take it. This is a wonderful thing you're doing for this community.
Absolutely. And we want outreach. We want the people to come. We want their support. And we want to also give support. So we're trying to do it on a bilateral situation, making sure that it's a win-win-win for everybody, a win for the artists, a win for the community, and a win for Sebrof Forbes Cultural Arts Center.
Now, I was talking to you not long ago, and we know about this program that's up here now, but you told me about a very fascinating next time. And since we'll see about the other, but we won't know about this. What's the name of the next program you're going to put forth?
Well, the next program, we haven't actually titled it, but Maurice Martinez, he is from New Orleans. He is a photographer and he photographed a lot of the jazz greats in New Orleans when he was a young man. And so we're going to bring his photography to the center as well as his music because he is a musician and just the richness of his history in actually doing and photographing or doing art and making sure that through photography that he was able to capture some of the greats like the Marcellus family out of New Orleans. He went to school with some of them. And so he has those photos starting back in the 1940s.
I'm going to be looking forward to hearing all about that when you get it out, because it sounds wonderful. And you're now going to have set up this thing where you're introducing or through the space through what you've done here to, have a committee come in and do this show that Claudia Vess and Lucy Blankstein have put out there now. And it's going to be different. It'd be different and will be wonderful. Now, this has been a short introduction for you. I'm sorry for that because I think we're going to meet a lot more of you. And
Yes.
so thank you very much. It's been great for me. I've loved all of this, to hear it. And you have the address here. Everything is going on, and you just need to know that everyone that's come in here, uh, you have explained as they were welcome. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really terrific. Thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Eloise.